Right. Let's talk about Brexit, as Jo Swinson is here and Isabel Oakshott is here. It hasn't really been an issue in this election campaign so far, apart from perhaps the SNP, and that is intrinsically linked to their independence ambitions. But just 13% of voters now say Brexit is one of the most important issues facing the country. This is according to research from UK and A Changing Europe, which is an academic think tank. And voters are now more likely to say they would vote to rejoin the EU than to stay out. How do you react to that, Isabel Oakshott?
Well, I'd like to know who did the research. I think you mentioned at the beginning it is a pro-EU, I believe, organisation that did that. They're pretty favourable towards Remain. I also think
funded by the government.
I also think that a lot of the polls were very wrong about opinion on Brexit before Brexit happened.
This is rubbish from Isabel. I'm sorry. The polls were within the margin of error. The vote itself was marginal. The difference was 1.4 million votes, I think. Nothing, really. It was not a decisive vote. And it's absolutely no wonder that it's falling apart, because it's a mess, it's a catastrophe. And of course, demographics itself are actually causing change. But more and more people now are awake to the fact that Brexit is a disaster. It was oversold on a bed of lies, mistruths, and it certainly seems there was a lot of dark funding involved as well.
I think if we restage the referendum, I mean, not only would it be a hideous and traumatic experience for all concerned, but I think you'd find opinion shifted in the course of that campaign very much as it did last time round.
I mean, there is a well-respected YouGov tracker which has for some time asked the question, has Brexit worked or has it not worked?
That's a different question.
And well, there's also a Rejoin, and on both of those, has it worked? Going down, is it not working? Going up, Rejoin going up, stay out, going down. So there clearly has been, and people like John Curtis are saying that opinions are changing. That doesn't mean that they're sort of running to the door to have another referendum and rejoin, but the views about whether it's working is changing.
Yeah, and I think that's perfectly reasonable. I mean, I'm not going to sit here as a staunch Brexiteer and say this thus far has been a fabulous success. It hasn't been done properly.
Are you surprised that the Lib Dems aren't making much more of this in this general election campaign, having said we're going to stop Brexit in 2019 under you?
I mean, I think it's a very different election campaign. You know, in 2019, we were still in the European Union and continuing that membership was an option. And we, gave people that choice in that election campaign and said, look, we're going to stand for this. It's, we're a pro-European party. And, to be fair, people made that choice. And I think, we recognise that. Since then, we've had, a pandemic that has left our NHS in really difficult states. We've got war in Europe with the whole energy shocks and impact on cost of living. There's other issues, as you say, that very same poll that, yes, shows that there's much more positivity about the European Union, and indeed also just, maybe one thing after such a divisive set of discussions on Brexit, maybe the one thing we can all agree on now is that it's kind of not really being very well done and therefore not really working. But equally, there's not that appetite, as you say, to revisit that. And so that's why, we're focusing on things that are going to make people's lives better, supporting the NHS and, investing in care. And I think that makes perfect sense.
Okay.
This is why I left the Lib Dems. They are not in the same place as me and many others who have always been pro-Remain and are now wanting to rejoin and have been wanting to rejoin really since Brexit even, before Brexit even started, because we know absolutely how bad it is and we're aware of what it does. And Jo Swinson trying to blame COVID and the Ukraine war for the destruction of Brexit is just insulting to people. We know that the NHS is actually damaged because of the fact that Brexit ensured a lot of the workers have not been able to stay here. Many of them decided to go home to their own countries. And yes, COVID caused some problems, but it really, the underneath residual massive problem is Brexit. And saying that they're going to focus on the NHS and care is just ridiculous, because without growth, we can't afford to put any more money into public services. This is why we need growth. So Jo Swinson is I don't know if she was ever a Remainer. A lot of the Lib Dems that were orange bookers, libertarians, actually really were more aligned with the Brexiteers. They're pro-free global free trade, pro-individualism, and also pro-small state. So they don't mind that there's a big black hole in the public purse because they don't want to fund public services. They think that the individual should do it all themselves. That is why I left the Lib Dems, because I'm a social democrat. I absolutely support the welfare state. I don't support a country that just leaves people to cope, especially for the poorest in society, with no help at all. We are a country that supports the welfare state, the National Health Service. A small number are voting for Nigel Farage, a growing number, the polls say, but they're not even aware that he is wanting to get rid of the NHS. And he backed Liz Truss's madness, which was all about getting tax down for the rich and having no welfare state. This is not what a lot of us, the majority, believe in. And that's why I'm voting Labour.
An opinion poll has Rishi Sunak as the first sitting Prime Minister in history to potentially lose his seat.
Some people may draw from the opinion polls is that if these opinion polls are correct, then Labour are on course for a supermajority. They'll use that supermajority to rig the system, to give votes.
You criticise Labour for getting more votes. It's down to you guys not being able to get your message across.
Well, as I say, I hope we're getting our message across on tax. And one of the things is that if people do reflect on the polls, and of course some may, they'll ask themselves this question. So if Labour do have that really big majority, what's to stop them rigging the system? What's to stop them giving votes to EU citizens, 16-year-olds, prisoners, and making sure that they could be a forever government?
If they've been given a mandate, it's not rigging the system.
Well, all of these are things that we know that Labour have entertained in the past, and my concern is that they would use their power in order to entrench themselves in power. As a general rule, democracies are better when we've got a vigorous,
14 years.
when you've got a vigorous opposition and a strong independent media. I don't believe that Keir Starmer, on the basis of his past, would welcome a vigorous independent media holding Labour to account, and he certainly would want a strong opposition.
He's going to get it.
Well, if he's elected, then I think that both of us in our respective roles, you as one of the nation's most popular broadcasters, me as a Conservative, we're both going to have to do our bit to hold him to account. The more Conservatives there are in Parliament, the better served our democracy will be.
Michael Gove, just scaremongering. The Conservatives were the party that abused power and tried to prorogue Parliament, lied to the Queen. They are the ones that have lied continually to the electorate and to Parliament. That is why Boris Johnson eventually left or was forced out of office. And all that Michael Gove is doing is projecting the Conservatives' lust for power and to hold on for it onto the Labour Party in an attempt to scare the electorate into voting Conservative, as well as scaring the electorate with this trope about Labour going to put up taxes when the Conservative Party have presided over the biggest rises in taxes since the last war. It's pretty desperate stuff. Anyway, let's see what happens in the next 2 weeks. 2 more weeks of this going on, and then hopefully things might get a bit calmer.